the show today, we're talking EV charging infrastructure, and we've got two of our EV charging infrastructure experts. So we've got Martin Spayes, who has 35 years of experience in business development with a mechanical engineering design background, patent holder and designer of various telecom products, including OPGW, ADSS attachment systems, contributor to several CGRAE committees, chairman of BEAMA's overhead line accessories section. I'm not familiar with that. What is the BEAMA?
It's like a UK lobbyist sort of organisation to make sure that our views are heard in the industry in the UK.
Okay. Founding member of the FTTH Council Europe. Explain that. What is kind of the FTTH Council Europe?
So FTTH is another lobbying organisation that was trying to promote the benefits of fibre as opposed to copper and the replacement and the regen sort of area there.
Okay. Member of the Charter Management Institute, MBA from Southampton Solent University. Where is that in relation to England?
That's south of England.
Okay. Okay.
In Southampton, as you'd guess.
Okay. And we have Patrick Cunningham, who has 25 years of experience in the composites industry, including composite tooling and prototyping, 12 years in the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And in the submarine fleet.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was probably the most interesting time of my life, to be honest with you. It was hours and hours of boredom wrapped around 5 minutes of unbelievable, terrifying excitement every so often. So it was incredible.
Yeah. Also, U.S. Navy Nuclear Power School. What is that?
Most of the people go into submarines go to the nuclear power school. It's in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and it is to learn how reactors work, how to deal with certain issues in the reactor, and how to maintain. I then went on to sonar school from there and became the eyes and ears of the submarine. So that was very exciting. I was a top secret clearance, and I was able to know where the submarine was. Not everybody on the crew knows where we are at any given time. So being a sonarman, I knew exactly where we were, what we were chasing, who the bad guys were. So it was exciting.
Okay. And you have extensive business development career that's focused on new industries, really. So you kind of started out and had some history on solar power, and now you're on electric vehicle.
Correct.
So let's get into it then. We're talking about EV charging infrastructure. So really the first thing I just have is kind of explain what that means, what we're talking about when we say EV charging infrastructure. There's a lot of different public versus private. There's different levels of chargers. So if one of you wants to take a stab at that.
Yeah, I'll start out, and Martin can back me up, because in the UK, it's a little different than what it is here in the US. But in the US, we have basically 4 levels of charger. Most people identify only 3, but I see that there's really 4. There's level 1, which is AC, and it's 120 volts, just like the plug in your house. And it's a slow charger. If you were to start charging on a Saturday, by the next Sunday, you would have your car fully charged, so it takes a long time to get it charged. It's really an ideal situation for people who commute maybe 15, 20 miles a day. Their car will be charged overnight, so it uses very little power to do that. Level 2 charging is 240 volts, kind of like a dryer outlet, and that'll charge your car fully from 0 to 100, which you shouldn't do. You should really keep your car between 20 and 80%, but it'll charge the car in about 8 hours. And then level 3 and 4 are DC chargers. One's called DCFC, direct current fast charge. And the level 4 that, like I said, a lot of people don't even refer to it because there's not a lot of chargers in the world that even do this. It's called XFC, and it's extra fast charging. And level 3 will charge your car in about 45 minutes fully. Typical charging is 20, 30 minutes. And what they're trying to get at with that charger and the level 4 charger is what's called the gas station experience, be able to pull in, charge, and go. And so that's what they're trying to do. And then you mentioned private versus public charging. There's really one more in there, and that's commercial. And so private charging is what you would do at home with your own charger, and no one else accesses it. There's no pay as you go. It's just your electricity bill feels the heat of the charge. And you get into commercial, and you're going to start using a credit card to or an account with the charging company to get the electricity needed. And then you get into public, and that could be school buses, that could be public transportation, that kind of thing. And typically, they don't have a pay system. It's just a setup. In other words, a charger will identify the bus as it pulls up via Bluetooth or some other mechanism, and they'll know that it's ready to be charged.
Okay. Anything else, Martin?
Well, yeah, I think the network and the infrastructure is going to be set up to manage your lifestyle, the way in which you use your vehicle, and also it's going to be a change in mentality and how you load the energy that you need for your car. So, for example, at home, which would probably be the best solution for you to charge your car, you might have a special rate for it to be charged overnight, for example, and then you would have top-up sort of charging for when you're going about town. So if you're at the gym, you would top up there. Mm-hmm. Typically, you're topping up to 80%, something like that. And then when you're hitting the long distances, it's like Patrick says, it's the motorway fast charging, DC charging system, but you're going to be changing the way. You're not going to be able to just pop down. You're not going to be able to run your tank down to empty and then go pop in and fill it up. You need to change your mentality. And we have to try and have there's a balance of changing mentality and setting up the infrastructure that can support the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add that level 3 and level 4 charging are not the safest way to charge your car. They introduce heat into the battery as well as electricity, and that degrades the battery. So really charging AC charging level 1, level 2 utilizes the onboard charger in the car, and therefore the onboard charger is able to feed the battery in a method that it wants, at a rate that it wants. And it's a safer way to charge the car. And just to throw a few numbers out there, if you were to use level 1, level 2 charging over a 10-year period of the car, you only reduce the efficiency of the battery by maybe 6, 8, as much as 10%. But if you use the level 3 DC charging, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, the heat being introduced into the battery can deplete the battery as much as 50% over a 10-year period. So people need to know that using level 3, level 4 charging for everyday charging is not the best way to charge your car.
Okay. So we talk a little bit about the gas station experience as it is right now, and we're not there. Are we going to get there? Or is this just, like you said, Mark, we need to change the mentality because that's not how it's going to be?
Well, it is going to need government support straight across the board. All of I'm seeing in Europe, a lot of the governments are providing incentives right the way from buying the electric vehicle to chargers at home to support changing out gas pumps to electric chargers in the motorway. I see some governments are even putting policy commitments where they will have a charger every 50 kilometers on major roads. So, yes, there is the answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about here is a massive amount of infrastructure building, especially if we want to meet these government targets. I know the U.S. has targets by 2030 or something like that. I think it's 50% of new manufactured cars. I'm sure that the UK and Europe has similar targets.
Even more stringent, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing that you've got to imagine, at the moment, the uptake in electric cars is like 10 times. It's increasing 10 times, whilst the number of chargers is only 3 times. So there's a lot of catch-up to do there.
Yes. And I think that's the number one, or at least when I read, one of the number one reasons why people are so apprehensive to purchase an electric vehicle is number one is the, whatever you want to call it. The chargers aren't out there, I guess.
Chargers aren't out there. They're often broken. So you pull up and you can't charge your car and you're in need of a charge.
Yeah.
So there's 3 psychological...
or they're vandalized.
That's true. So there's 3 psychological effects going on with EV chargers. There's the gas station experience, which we've talked about already. Mm-hmm. There's what's called range anxiety. And that's you get in your car and you want to head to 2 states over to see grandma. And you've got to plan that out. It's not something you can do. Like if you have a gas car or a petrol car, you can get in and you can go and feel comfortable that you're going to be able to get fuel on the way there and on the way back. It's not that simple in an EV vehicle. You've got to plan it out, know where the charging stations are, know what your range is, and know what your mileage between the stations is going to be. So that creates what's called range anxiety with people. And so they don't even want to go buy an EV based on that psychological effect. So they have to get over that first. That's improving as states are putting in chargers along the highway at rest areas and that kind of thing. So that's kind of going away.
And you have to commit to stop.
Yes,
You have to commit.
You have
to
to
stop.
say to yourself, I
You
have to stop.
You can't stop and
Yep.
fill up and eat on the go. You have to stop.
Yep.
And then there's argument that you could be nervous about being stuck on the motorway in your car, waiting for it to charge, hanging around.
Right. And if you are one of those people that it's efficient in your travel and you're trying to travel overnight, you can't sit in your car and run the radio and run the air conditioning or the heat while your car's charging. It's fully off. And so if there's no place to go inside and grab a burger or a coffee, you're kind of stuck out in the cold or the heat. So, there's issues like that need to be worked out as we go along. And those are minor issues in the big picture, but they're still uncomfortable
They need
things
to be
that people
solved.
do.
They need to be solved.
And they need to be sold, absolutely.
So, what is the solution? How do we implement all of this infrastructure very quickly? Because I think, again, our targets are 2030 and they're pretty aggressive. And obviously, it seems like the infrastructure is, in some ways, the holdup here. So, how do we change that?
Well, it depends on what you call infrastructure. I call the infrastructure the grid. We need that first. Before anything and everything is built out, we need that first. One of the jokes we make around here at PLP is we're in Mayfield Village, Ohio here. And if everybody in Mayfield Village bought an EV tomorrow, we would have a brownout. There's just not enough electricity to go around for a sudden surge of EVs if they were purchased. So that's got to be resolved. So I'll throw some numbers out there. The typical EV uses 3.8 kilowatts per day of charging. And if the government's projections of 26.4 million vehicles are on the road by 2030, that's going to eat up about 101 terawatts of energy needed. And it's going to cost us about $125 billion to build that out. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I personally would have preferred if the government said, let's build this grid out, then let's go to electric vehicles. But no, they said, let's go to electric vehicles and we'll worry about the grid later. They did it backwards. And so that's our preference. PLP is a grid business. We're in the business of building of the electrical grid with our componentry. And so this is one of the reasons why we're in EV. We want to support both sides of that argument and be able to build out the grid, but support EVs as it's coming. So.
And as we go forward and as this is built, there are systems and developed systems where they're sharing the load. So the energy is distributed evenly between their managing which car is plugged on and which needs more juice than the other, and it will feed accordingly. And there's already small micro systems available to do that on a smaller charge basis, but that will need to grow across, as we get more and more charge points getting out in the field.
Mm-hmm. But Martin touched on something earlier, and that is 85% of all charging is done in the home. And that's where people really need to think about, if I buy an EV, do I have the room in my electrical panel to put in 50 amps in order to charge the car? Or even 30 amps would do the job, but 50 amps would be certainly not encumber anything else in the house, let's say. And you choose between the dryer and the EV being charged tonight kind of thing. So and if you have that room in your electrical panel and you can do it, that's where you'll do most of your charging. You wouldn't have to worry about charging at work or along the way or the grocery store until you start heading off on a road trip like we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest issue is if you're lucky enough to have off-street parking, then you can probably get a charger fitted into your property. Mm-hmm. If you don't have off-street parking, then we're going to have to provide a charger on the street, on the sidewalk, around the sidewalk. Maybe you're not even able to park your car outside your house.
Right,
because
how do you do this in London or something that's very concentrated?
Yeah. And most UK houses, they don't use their garage to put the car in. It's the garden furniture and stuff like that. So that's that's the next issue, is actually finding places and finding enough places around on-street parking.
Uh-huh. So you've both been on site when chargers have been installed and have worked on with contractors. What is the biggest challenge for contractors in this industry that are installing these?
Well, you have a mixture of semi-skilled or civil work, and then you have skilled electricians there, and you want to make sure that you're efficient on having the right people there at the right time to do the work that's relevant. And the other thing is that you may only have the funding or only the requirement for one charger or two chargers. But goodness me, you know that in a year or so, you're going to need to install another 4 or 5 as the more and more electric vehicles coming along. And so you need to kind of future-proof this. So there is a strong argument for, even if you're not going to install all of the chargers, to have all the infrastructure, dig once. There's nothing worse than your road being dug up for fiber, then the next year it's dug up for water and it's dug up for power. Just dig it up once. Mm-hmm. Put a row of foundations ready in there. Seal them off and have them ready for when the next charger is needed.
Right. Yeah, and we had a discussion about broadband a couple of weeks ago on this show, and they talked a lot about permitting. And because every time you dig, you need permitting and all that. So if you can just do that once and get it all done,
correct.
And all the permitting is, you don't have to come back and redig again.
And a few contractors have told me that 60% of their cost is the civils work, the digging up of the ground, the bringing in the equipment and the people to do that. And if you do that just once, and you're, as Martin was saying, put in one charger, but you put in bases or 4 or 5 bases along the way that's ready for chargers to expand, that's going to save money in the future. But it's hard for people to spend that up front, but mm-hmm. it's an important way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's maybe there's the argument is you spend your incentive, your government support on doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one topic that always comes up is kind of this topic of charging equity. So how do you combat that? It seems like right now EVs are very, wealth centric. They're expensive to begin with. I mean, the cars are, and if you own a home, you can have a charging unit in your house. But what if you don't own a home, or what if you live in a rural area? How are we going to combat that and have a global network of reliable chargers that are affordable?
So I'm speaking of the United States only here because that's where I live and what I deal with mostly, and I'll let Martin speak to the UK and what he sees around the EU. We're an expansive country, and one of the things you notice is if they're not putting chargers in poor neighborhoods. They're not putting chargers in neighborhoods that are economically run down, let's call it. They're putting them in nicer areas with nicer shopping centers and nicer hospitals and that kind of and nicer gas stations and so they clearly know that the target is people with money that are buying EVs. And it's unfortunate that the EVs do cost more. The battery packs in these cars are very expensive, and they've been building what they call ICE cars, internal combustion engine cars, now for over 120 years. So they know how to build those in a fast way. And the EV thing is just really kind of, in the big picture of things, coming onto the scene. Even though some have been around for a few years now, they really are just coming into the scene as far as high production goes. Tesla is the leader in high production EVs, and they know how to make them the cheapest. And if you look at margins per car, they're making more than anybody else out there by a factor of 10 as far as margins go per car. So I would say Tesla is probably going to be one of the leaders, and he's talked about it. Elon Musk has talked about making EVs available to all economic ranges, and like the Model 3 being able to get that down into the high $20,000 range, and then used EVs. That's going to be a real challenge, is getting used EVs out to folks that typically buy used vehicles and don't have the money to go buy a new vehicle. Because the reliability and the concern about the reliability of the battery has to be overcome.
Mm-hmm. Martin, anything different in the UK?
Not really. That there is new legislation that new buildings should be EV ready. Now, what EV ready means, whether there's a charger or whether it just has the electrical plug availability for that is done. And most developments now do have to have a section of what they call social housing, which and usually there is a car park and they will have to have EV ready there. But it is about the people that are buying reused secondhand cars, are going to be still going to be buying, ICE cars. But then again, this is where we've got to change it with the public transport. Electric buses, then we talk about electric buses and different types of charging, and electric trains and electric tramways and things like that. But it is an issue of getting down there. Some of the equivalent electric versions of cars are sometimes 70% more expensive than the petrol variant, which is prohibitive.
Mm-hmm. So let's look 15 years down the line here. What is that charging experience, or what is that experience for owning an electric vehicle, and what happens to all the gas stations or petrol stations, as you would call them? Do those get converted to electric vehicle? I think Shell has a pretty big play in this. I think they're converting a lot of their gas stations, petrol stations into that.
Shell and BP, Circle K, the convenience store company, which is, a lot of people don't realize that Circle K is much bigger outside the United States than it is inside the United States. They are realizing the value in having EV chargers inside their convenience centers or their gas stations. Gas and diesel aren't going away for tens of decades. We just can't push cargo down the street like we can with a diesel truck. And the United States has about 150 years, last estimate, of oil in the ground in order to supply us with fuel and diesel. So I hope we would use that 150 years wisely and say, all right, for the next 20 years, let's say, let's perfect the electrical grid, and let's perfect the battery, and let's perfect the EV. And that's really, I like to hear that come out of our government, that we want to perfect these things. And that way we maintain the 125 years of oil that's left in the ground as a reserve for some natural world catastrophe or something. That's what I'd like to see or hear out of the government. I think we're going to push for more electric bikes and motorcycles in the inner cities. As Martin was saying, electric buses are the ideal situation. Electric school buses are, I've thought for 10 years, electric school buses are the ideal candidate for EV because they can charge all night long. They sit idle, they don't move all night long, and they only run 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. So they're the ideal situation. And if you think about all the school buses we have in our country, we don't have 5,000. We have probably 200,000 of these things in the United States. It's a crazy number of school buses that we have. And if they can charge and be ready to go, it's the ideal candidate for that. Police cars. Now, here's where capital is going to come in. A police station has, let's say a small town has 10 police cars. They're probably going to have to buy 20 because in the middle of a shift, the cop's probably going to have to pull back into the station and then swap cars and then charge the car he has and go back out into the street. So I could see that potentially being a potential issue. I was talking to a state trooper the other day at a gas station, and he says he fills up his tank 2 times per shift. And if you think about the range of a gas tank versus the range of a battery, they're very similar. And so he's doing that twice per shift. It just got me thinking that a cop would have to probably have 2 cars to work with in order to make that happen. Taxis are already going EV. Many taxis in many cities are Tesla, Leaf, that kind of thing. So, I think we're on a good track with some of the vehicles out there that are perfect for transitioning into EV. I think the push to get the normal Joe Blow in the United States to convert to an EV is premature because our grid's just not ready for it. So, and then there's the inconvenience factor of where we're putting chargers right now. We're fortunate enough here at POP to have 4 chargers out front. We give it free charging to our employees, but the folks down the street at XYZ company, I won't name them, They don't have that ability, so
Right.
they can only charge at home, and they come in, they have to go back home and charge again. So it's not as convenient for that particular company right down the street. So there's a lot of that still left in the United States. Um, if I were to go into a map around Mayfield, I will only pick out like 5 spots where we have EV charging in Mayfield Village, and so that those 5 spots aren't convenient to 99% of the people in Mayfield.
Mhm. So, I mean, and it sounds like in the future too, it's going to be the model is going to change in that you are charging at home and
Right.
you're charging at work
Right.
or wherever your destination for the most part. And those, petrol or gas stations are really only for long haul. I mean,
Well, I kind of see them as the new social club. You know, you know, you know, instead of filling up your car with gas and picking up a cup of coffee at Starbucks and moving on, you're all gonna be
it's a hangout
chipping it.
place.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
hangout
Yeah,
place.
you'll be charging your car and having
Yeah,
well, maybe
yeah.
not a beer.
Well, with autonomous cars, maybe.
maybe.
Yeah.
But there are still some serious issues to cover. One thing that comes into my mind is airport parking. You have somebody that drops their car there and goes for a 2-week trip, and somebody's got to manage the plug and moving them around. You can't have everybody plugged in all at the same time. There's a conversion rate of flipping over from a few EV cars taking a few EV slots, but then there's the flip over going from all of them being EV and all wanting to hook up, and some come stay on a trip of various lengths. And I don't know if it's going to turn to valet parking full in or what.
Right.
I've given thought to that too, Martin, and I think the level 1 charger is the ideal situation for airports. You plug into a 110 volt, they can easily have those in the parking garage,
Yeah.
and you don't need necessarily a specific charger for that. And it'll trickle charge the car while
Or
they're
an
gone for 5
intelligent
days.
system.
Yeah.
So let's talk US, UK. So I saw that there was a Wired article recently that said the US refuses to fall in love with electric cars. And in fact, some stats here are, I think it's something like 20% of new cars in all of Europe are EV. China is also very high. It's like 10% or something like that. And the US is 5%.
We're at 7. Yeah, we're
7?
at 7. Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
Why? So why is so much adoption in Europe and not here in the US?
In Europe, they've got firm commitments. Some countries are looking at 2030. Some are looking at 2035 for total banning of sale of ICE cars. Norway is fully flipped over. You look at it in the UK. There is not an advert for a car that's fueled by diesel or petrol anymore. 100%.
Really?
It's electric. On the billboards, it's just electric cars.
I
People
noticed
still
that when
buy
I was in
them, but-
December. Yeah, when I was over in December, I noticed that.
I was shocked when I came here and they're still advertising.
Yeah,
It's mainly
petrol cars.
I mean, trucks and
Sure.
everything else.
we are. We have, for the love of God, we have Motor City, Detroit. We have down the street in the south side of Cleveland, we have Summit Racing, and there's not a garage within 50 miles of Summit Racing that doesn't have a hot rod sitting in it. People are in love with ICE vehicles in the United States, and they don't want to be told what to do because the United States has kind of had that mentality for years. Second Amendment, First Amendment. They don't want you taking their hot rod away either. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's going to be a lot of pushback on that kind of thing. The folks that are driving EVs in the United States fit into a club, and that club is either they're environmentally minded or they are
Early adopter.
early adopter. But the Tesla drivers kind of fit into a different club, and they just want to be kind of part of the cool club of I have a Tesla. Okay. So they're not all environmentalists. They just want to be in that cool Tesla club.
Right.
It is culture.
It
It
is
is
very much
culture, and
culture.
it's a commitment to climate
Yep.
change and environmental issues.
Exactly.
Driving it. And Europe is kind of maybe leading the way.
Are they expensive in Europe or comparatively
EV
priced?
cars?
Yes, EV
Oh.
cars.
Oh yeah, so they're 40%.
Because that's got to be
plus.
prohibitive. I mean, I think that is, you can get cars are expensive and they're only going up because of inflation and all that, but you can still get a fairly moderately priced, smaller car, but I don't think you can as an EV. I mean, they're just priced premiumly.
The Kia EV6 is a fairly moderately priced car, $39,000. But if you say, I want a 350-mile range EV, you're going to be into the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 range. Okay?
Yeah. Even
So
30,000. I mean, that's a lot for a lot of people. I was looking at in China, I think they have a lot of adoption, and part of it is because they have very cheap cars. One of their cheapest, I think, EVs is like $5,000 or $6,000 US. Now, granted, it's probably not the best car, but
right.
still.
I'll jump on what.
But there's tax incentives on buying
Yeah, that's what I was
vehicle.
gonna
There's
say.
tax
That's true.
incentives on supporting you to
Especially
to
in the
buy
Nordic region.
the charger. There's for a company, a lot of countries use company cars as incentive. There's corporate tax incentives in different countries for that. Road fund tax in the UK is discounted for electric vehicles. So there's a lot of incentives which will push you that way.
And in Sweden and Norway, the Nordic countries, which has the most adoption of anything in Europe, they will give you tax incentives to get it down to the price of an ICE car.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an even swap.
And to your point, just about the U.S. historically, I think part of it too is on our manufacturing side, car manufacturing side. It was kind of on China's side. This is very new for them, right? So they don't have this built-in infrastructure of these internal combustion engine cars
Right.
that they have to retool and do all that kind of stuff. They kind of can start from scratch. So we're having to do all of that all over again while we still have to maintain all this other infrastructure.
It's kind of ironic China's still building coal-fired power stations to power an EV car.
100%, yes. Yep. So what are final thoughts here while we kind of conclude? So where are we going? What is the future for electric vehicle charging? Are we going to be able to hit these targets that everyone is, hoping that we can? Any final thoughts on that?
It's going to be a challenge. I think there is a lot of attention to it. We're seeing this gap between the take-up of cars and the availability of chargers. We're looking at it. We're trying to find different chargers that are faster. It's all about evolving that. And what we've got to do is make sure that there is the infrastructure ready to fit those and ready to connect them and ready to energize them. Mm-hmm. I think.
I don't think we'll hit the targets. I know that the people that created the targets probably know we won't hit the targets. They create the targets thinking that, okay, if we hit even 50% of this, we'll call it a success. Mm-hmm. That's probably what they had in their mindset when they got started. But I'm dealing every day with companies such as Rivian. They're electrifying our national parks so that when you go to the national park, you have a way to charge while you're out hiking. I'm dealing with people that are Tesla, for instance, is now just convinced GM and Ford to adopt their charging infrastructure, and now you can pull up to a Tesla charger not yet, but soon, with your Chevy or your Ford and charge on a Tesla charger with a Tesla plug. So all those adoptions are coming. So there's been about 10 different standards on how to charge. Those are all starting to meld into one or two, but certainly trying to get towards the Tesla way, which Tesla was kind of the Apple of charging for a while. You had your own plug, you had your own everything. And Elon Musk has soon realized that I need to release this to the world if I really am going to live the way I talk. So he's trying to do that. So I applaud him for that. I see a ton of progress in the over-the-road trucking companies like Frito-Lay, which is PepsiCo. They are trying to come up with trucks that can do 500 miles in a day with a 40,000-pound load, and they've realized quickly that they can do about 100 miles in a day with a 40,000-pound load if the battery's fully charged. So they're a quarter of the way there, but yet that other 75% is a huge hurdle. And so Tesla is going to try and lead the way. So what a lot of people don't realize is Tesla is really a battery company that just happens to build cars. And then they realized that we need to put these batteries into something in order to sell our batteries. So they started building cars, and now they're trying to build trucks, and they're trying to build other things like that.
There's lots of pilot projects going on.
Yes.
In Germany, there's electric trucks with a catenary where they drive through sections where they can charge where they're on the move. So all these things are evolving, as we go. Wireless charging might be the case coming forward. So we got to take the technology with us on this journey and improve, and maybe hopefully that'll kickstart us to catch up.
So what wireless charging? What is that?
You just hover over the top like
Like
your phone.
It can be static or dynamic. You can pull over and sit, and it'll charge, or it'll charge as you're driving down the road, and there's something in the road that's charging as you're going down the road. So the first beta units of that was killing cats, so it wasn't working out too well, but it's getting better. And so they're trying to figure out how to put lower power. Yes, they'll charge the car. Trains in some areas have been doing this for a while. Buses have been doing this for a while. So, that technology is coming. It's incredibly expensive. It's 100x times what's putting a level 2 charger in as far as cost goes.
I would assume you need it everywhere, miles and miles of that stuff, or at least very long
Exactly.
distances.
Exactly.
To charge.
Or a spot in the ground. A bus pulls up to a bus stop. So a bus stops at a bus stop every 15 minutes, and he's there for 15 minutes. He gets 15 minutes of charging before he moves on.
Sure.
That's the kind of thinking that they're going with on those kinds of charging techniques.
Gotcha. All right. So final question. You're from the UK. Favorite American food?
Favorite American food?
Yeah. You've been over here for
steak.
Steak?
Yeah, I love a steak.
Good old steak. Okay. And you've been over to the UK.
Several times.
Favorite British food?
Fish and chips.
Fish and chips. Can't go wrong.
Fish and chips with a good cold beer. I love it. Absolutely.
Great.
Bangers and mash is probably number 2, but yeah, fish and chips.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being on the show, Martin, Patrick. If you want to connect with them more, they're on LinkedIn and very active. So be sure to connect with them.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.